Good morning, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Social Work Services Committee. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded and will be made available on the Council website for public viewing. Remote participants, please follow the Good Practice Guide, which includes muting microphones and switching off your video if you're not addressing the meeting. Right, speak in the Teams chat function if you want to contribute, and if you're in the hall, you can do this on your iPhone or iPad. I would ask that members don't repeat contributions already made by other members, and that no material should be posted in the chat function if it is intended to be part of the discussion. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. And if any member has to leave the meeting, please either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time and write leave in the Teams chat function, and then join when you rejoin the meeting, so that we can keep track on whether the meeting is quorate. All members should speak clearly, taking their time and speaking directly into the microphone when making contributions. When referring to reports, please provide the reference to the relevant page and paragraph to allow everyone in the committee to follow. And please focus contributions on areas where clarification is required or to propose an alternative to a recommendation. At that, Claire, can you please provide the surrogate indicating who is participating remotely, and any apologies, please? And I confirm at this point my agreement for participation of members named as participating remotely.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I can advise that since the papers were published, there's been a change in membership. Keith Walters has been replaced by Paula Stevenson in this committee. We've got one apology this morning being from the Vice Chair. There's a few members present on Teams, being Councillors Graham Bell, Karen Crothers, Lynn Davis, Ian Howie, Maureen Johnston, Emma Jordan, Tracy Little. There's some members not present, currently being Andrew Justy, Chrissy Hill, Lily Scobie and Paula Stevenson. Thank you.
Just to add to Paula Stevenson will be joining the meeting about 12 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, just noted Councillor Scobie is now online. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. And before we go ahead now, this is my first meeting as chair of this committee, but I'd like to thank Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Hill for their stewardship in previous accounts, and thank you for their efforts. Thank you very much to bring us to this point. Okay, item number 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from any members? Councillor Dorbert.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to your first committee as Chair. Declaration, as a statement of connection, sorry, I'm an IGB even voting member. Thank you.
Okay, I will also declare that statement of connection as a member of the IGB. Councillor Jordan.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just the same, it's just a statement of connection, and I'm a substitute member for the IJB. Thank you.
Thank you. No other declarations, then we'll move on to item 3, which is a minute of the previous meeting on the 10th of June 2025. The minute is for approving. Are members happy to approve?
Happy to approve, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, Social Work Services Revenue Budget Final Outturn Report for the period ended 31st of March 2025. This report provides members with the financial performance against budget for social work services revenue for 2024 to 2025, including the significant pressures and increased demands that have impacted on the social work services position during the year and how these have been addressed at the end of the year. It's a retrospective report looking at last financial year ending at 2025, and Janet is available to answer any questions. Janet, is there anything you would like to add to the report? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just refer members to paragraph 4.15, and apologies for the typo. There's actually only 2 appendices to this report, and the reserves were approved at the Enabling and Customer Services Committee.
Thank you, Janet. Do members have questions? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you very much, Chair, and welcome as the new Chair of this committee. Thank you. It was just to ask a quick question to Janet. Could you just give us some background, please, as to the placement of adults with disabilities and mental health issues? Are they kept within Dumfries and Galloway, or are they put out with the area? Is it possible to know what's going on with that? Thank you very much.
Yeah, Stephen Morgan says he'll take that one. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Drysdale. In terms of adults with learning disabilities and complex needs, that's within the delegated budget. This is the non-delegated budget. But in response to the question, it is mixed. We have some services locally where people can reside and have support, but for really complex needs, we quite often have to go out of region in other parts of the UK to source appropriate placements to meet those needs. Thank you.
Councillor Drysdale.
Thanks very much for confirming that. Thank you through yourself, Chair. So just to ask you, what would help with that? Is there any way that we can bring them back into the area, or is it that we don't have the equipment and the staff available? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the follow-up. Yeah, there's a range of reasons. One is accommodation, whether that's suitable, accessible and available. The infrastructure of our current services is such that we can't meet the needs of some of the most complex. If we were to look at that in the future, you know, there are other models available, but, you know, that would take a lot of planning. But it's certainly areas that colleagues in the partnership are looking at in terms of what's the overall best balance about how we provide care to people from Dumfries and Galloway in the region compared to Outwith.
You okay with that, Councillor Drysdale? Thank you. Do any other members have any other questions? Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a question about when children are taken out of the area, does that increase the cost, or does the cost stay the same? Thank you.
Stephen? Yeah, Charles Rocks.
Oh, apologies. Through yourself, Chair. Councillor Sater, in previous committees we've evidenced the significant costs that are attributed towards external residential care. That depends on an individual commissioning contract basis for each individual child, sometimes depending on need and depending on actual capacity and demand within the private sector. But we've profiled that before, and I'd be happy to have any other conversation with yourself to help understand some of the pressures that are within that and about our best value agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. It's not great reading, but well done on getting to the end of the financial year and balancing as much as we can finances. This is mainly a financial report, but I've got a question to ask about residential care for children. You wouldn't be surprised to know that. We've been asking about it for a number of months. It's also connected to agenda item 5. Now, we are incurring significant additional expenditure due to the increase in both residential care and family placements. And it's also reflected in the next report concerning Q1 of this year. But I've rehearsed this question numerous times at this committee regarding proactive and reactive responses from the Council and how we deal with this. And whilst we're pleased that we're partially addressing this by looking at increasing council-run residential places, and that's going forward, and I'm pleased about that. Hopefully more than 4, but at least 4 in the future. I can't let this opportunity pass without making a plea. This is a formal plea and actually moving something that we look at. This issue I'm going to raise is raised as a priority via Social Work Scotland. And I know, Stephen, you're chair of the Children and Families Standing Committee there, which has residential childcare as one of its subcommittees. And via COSLA chair, COSLA forums with Scottish Government. We spend a fortune putting children into privately run care homes. And as far as I can gather, Scottish Government isn't addressing this at all. They're doing nothing about it. I've asked numerous times at this committee that that's raised with Scottish Government via various forums, and I haven't had nothing back on that. So I'm moving now that we do that formally and raise this, because I think part of the reactive stuff we've been doing is spending an extra £3 million or more than £3 million a year on funding for private sector residential care homes in Scotland and out with Scotland sometimes. And that's, to me, is appalling use of taxpayers' money, an appalling way to manage our children and young people. Let's give you an example from Westminster, what they're doing, and perhaps you can pass that on to Scottish Government as well. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, as part of her spending review, announced 1.1 billion more for children's social care reform and care placements in England and Wales, part of the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, which I think is really proactive, which will improve children's social care and the placement market and tackle profiteering and providing for, amongst other things, a cap on profits of non-local authority providers of children's social care. So I think we should perhaps mention this and look at this when we're actually engaging with Scottish Government, both at COSLA and via Social Work Scotland. And if possible, could a report be brought back or a briefing provided to members on a response to that, please? I think it's absolutely vital that we encourage or lobby Scottish Government to deal with this as a matter of urgency, because it isn't just our local authority, it's local authorities across Scotland that are paying out an extraordinary amount of money that perhaps could be reduced if this was dealt with by the government of the day. It's not our, I can argue about the appropriateness for profit operators, and accept that the legitimacy of having private providers in our social care system is one for our elected government to take forward, not us. However, I strongly suggest they do need to be given a forceful measure to do so, because after all, while we're dealing with finances in this report, we're actually dealing with children's lives. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dorward. Stephen?
Councillor Dorward, as you stated, I'm not surprised that you raised the issue. It's a very important one. What I'd like to say, though, is some of the work that's actively ongoing at the moment. So, as you've said, I chair Social Work Scotland's Children and Family Standing Committee, and this is an active area that we're working on. We're doing benchmarking across the country to look at what different local authorities are paying, and particularly in additional costs for care, because almost all of that money does go into, you know, non-local government services, and many of those are profit-making, as you've said. Once we've got further data on that, I will bring a report to this committee. It will be a headline report because the work belongs to Social Work Scotland, and they need to have the governance in place in terms of what they do with that. What I can also add, though, which is of importance, and I'm hoping Charles might help me out with the title, but there's a new bill that's been proposed. It was to, you know, it's been called the Promise Bill, but it's not its formal title. It's rather lengthy, and I don't recall the full title, so I'm hoping Charles can help me out. But within that bill, Councillor Dorward, is an element of removing or reducing profit in the children's care system. It doesn't go to say remove it completely. And that's partly due to, if we remove all profit overnight, we would probably collapse the system, and we would have lots and lots of children, hundreds of children across Scotland, without appropriate accommodation and care and support. So we will have a position once the formal consultation opens, and we would bring that to this committee, and we would do the work with the chair and with the rest of the committee, look at what Dumfries and Galloway's response to that bill will be at the point of consultation. So there will be formal opportunities there as well. So hopefully that gives you some assurance that things are being done in the background, if it's not necessarily in the public domain at this moment in time.
Councillor Dorward, want to come back?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for that, Stephen. That's really reassuring, and I hope the bill being proposed comes to Parliament or Holyrood fairly soon, and I'll leave you, Charles, to work out what the bill's called. But I think that's great. I think if we're following the lead from the Westminster Government, that's really good, because we really need to look at, I mean, it's not just about money, but the amount of money we're spending across this country is phenomenal, and we can actually do probably a better job if that's more regulated. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Dorward. Councillor Wilson?
It was just a second, Councillor Dorward, if needed. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, move on to recommendations. 2.1, that resources of 1.913 million have been applied to social work services for the Greed Council social work budget pressures funding within reserves. The application of this funding has resulted in social work service returning a balanced budget position at the end of 2024-25 financial year, as reflected within Appendix 1. 2.2, the service reserves that have been earmarked by social work services as detailed in Appendix 2, and 2.3, updates on the planned investment and mitigation measures which have been agreed to address the estimated budgetary pressures and increased demand for children's residential placements and family placements, fostering allowances during the year. Members happy to approve? Thank you. Moving on to item 5, Social Work Services Revenue Budget Monitoring 2025-26 for the period ended 30th of June 2025, quarter 1. This report provides members with an overview of performance against budget for the period ending 30th of June 2025, end of quarter 1, for social work services, including the details of budget realignment review that has been undertaken with the service management team to ensure detailed budgets are realistic for the current financial year. Again, Janet is available to take questions. Anything you wish to add, Janet?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add to the report.
Across to members for questions, thanks. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 27 at 4.12, it's just about the homelessness and housing support, and maybe just why there is an expectation for this to rise, and what options do we have for homeless, as obviously I know we're using hotel and bed and breakfast, but they're expensive and not appropriate. And then on page 28 with the implications and risks, where it says there are risks this pressure could increase further and the senior management team required to manage and implement further mitigations to address the 448k pressure reported above. I'm just wondering what those mitigations could be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. And Steve Morgan.
Councillor Wilson, I'll respond to your first point in relation to housing support, and with the Chair's permission, I'll pass over to Charles Rocks because the expenditure is predominantly in his services for the second point. So you're absolutely right that in terms of homelessness and housing support, we're seeing increased demand on the team and increased need in the region. And we do have a significant number of bed and breakfast accommodations, which we know isn't suitable. However, it is better than the alternative of no accommodation at all. So we're looking at prevention as being our key area, and looking at how we can offer more support closer to people who are at risk of homelessness. And we're in the process of working with colleagues in procurement to look at the Housing First approach. We have a very limited but highly successful approach locally, and we're looking at realigning some of our funding internally to expand that Housing First approach, which looks at giving accommodation first and intensive support through our third sector and voluntary sector partners as well. So that's one of the things that we're doing. We will continue to monitor the situation, and we're also seeing, obviously, thankfully, some infrastructure changes as well locally that will have a difference. So it is a difficult position to be in, but we are doing some things actively right now to address that, and we'll closely monitor things as we move forward. Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll hand over to Charles for the second part of the question.
Charles.
Through yourself, Chair, Councillor Wilson, I'll just obviously highlight some of the work, the quality assurance work that goes around external residential care as an example, which is quite significant. There's a high level of scrutiny. That ultimate decision through myself and Stephen lies in terms of making that placement for a child and young person, which we don't take lightly, both about the likelihood of a child having to be removed or move out the area, to the impact in terms of cost. So there's a huge level of scrutiny that takes place there. We are looking at the overall risk appetite in terms of the sort of multi-agency landscape of that sort of support network, the scaffolding and support to ensure that we've got actually scrutinising the plans to ensure that we can manage that, because we've got good evidence place at times that the alternative, which is within our care and within an external residential care placement, doesn't necessarily improve the outcomes of some of the children and young people. And so we're trying to ensure that there is a better value approach to that for the child in terms of the planning. Second to that, there is a new layer of scrutiny around all placements, particularly around placements for the children in their pathways and transitions to improve the journey of children through care and out with care, but also to look at better ways in terms of cost and value into kind of the understanding of continuing care, and where continuing care meets need. We can support that in different means and ways, either through independent living or supported accommodation. And we've got some work streams linked in within that now that help support and mitigate some of these costs. And I'm hopeful and confident that different committees will see a change within that we can evidence and demonstrate to members in terms of the work that's been done there. Thank you.
You happy with that, Councillor Wilson? Thank you. Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's regarding children and paying organisations to look after them. Is there any movement or more thought of bringing some of this in-house? And it would, against obviously the costs, would it be less expensive to in-house because then we can control the budgets and a lot more easily rather than companies just saying this is what we want and some way you're being held over a barrel? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slater. Charles, can you respond? Thanks.
Through yourself, Chair, Councillor Slater, that we've obviously presented different options for members to consider that. There's a work stream that's taken that forward. I think Councillor Dorwood had referenced earlier on. Perhaps the pace of that is not necessarily as robust as members would maybe like, but there are areas that we need to explore within that with different various partners to come up with the best model within that. So I can give reassurance that that work is done. We are incredibly passionate of trying to maximise return as many of our children and young people and give that support at the heart of our communities. And I think that's a basis of a child and young person's right, if they're not safe to remain in the care of their caregiver or family, that we are close to their community and friendships as possible. I don't necessarily envision there will be a time that we might not necessarily need to commission and contract an external residential due to some of the nature of complex care. But there is an area of care and need that we can absolutely meet, and we're working really hard to achieve that. But again, happy to have a conversation with yourself to link in to kind of give some other additional information how that's going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. You satisfied with that, Councillor Slater?
Just thank you very much for giving me that information. Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Councillor Dorwood.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's kind of continuing from agenda item 4, isn't it? And there's still significant financial pressures on the service, and hopefully the work that's being done, we can look at mitigating that. The question I want to ask specifically is on, it's also linked to agenda item 4 actually, and which is page 21, the appendix 1 resettlement on the budget line, and taking that forward to agenda item 5. The figures are somewhat different. Appendix 1 on page 33. The funding for the service has been almost removed. Now, I don't understand. I'm not a finance person, so somebody could explain this to me. Resettlement on page 21 has got three stars against it, and it says reflects the recognition of grant funding to support the resettlement programme in accordance with proper accounting standards. I don't understand what that means. So if somebody could explain that, that would be really useful. And then going on to my question on agenda item 5, there's very little funding there for resettlement. And I've had some concerns raised from third sector colleagues about this. This is their perspective. I'm just repeating that here. I'm not speaking, I'm not saying I know this, but this is their perspective. That they're saying that the degree of resettlement input that people have been used to who are eligible for it has been vastly reduced, and some folk have had it removed. Now you can argue the rights and wrongs about that, but I think the perspective is that folk that were receiving resettlement support in the previous financial year are not getting it now, and probably, according to third sector colleagues, still require it to enable them to resettle properly in the region. So I'm asking if that's the case, if that's the decision that's been made, and is there any way that we can actually continue with that support for these individuals and tail it off gradually, as opposed to just what I've been told is dropping them and telling them they're no longer getting support. I think that's if that is the case, that's not the best way to treat people who are here as refugees and want to settle in this region. So some information on the budget and some information on the programme and what we're attempting to do with that would be really useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorwood. Stephen, can you assist with the first part? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor, for your question as well. So regarding the treatment with the 3 stars, essentially what it was is there's specific accounting standards that we apply when we're recognising grant income. And previously what we would do is if there was any risk of having to repay that to the provider, we would carry that forward as an accrual. However, after looking at the risk of having to repay the resettlement money, it was felt that it was appropriate to recognise that in the year. So essentially the credit that you see within there is just us moving it into the general fund and recognising it. So it's actually within service reserves available to support 25-26. So that money is still available, just to confirm. It's really just an accounting change. Essentially what we normally do is carry it forward. But as I say, we've recognised it in line with proper accounting practice. And as I say, it is available. There's been no decision to not make that available for resettlement in 25-26. So that's kind of the approach on the budget side. Is that answer?
You satisfied with that, Councillor Darwood? Yep, Stephen's going to respond to that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Darwood. In relation to resettlement support and activity and the funding that we've received, as has already been stated, there was a significant underspend, and that's been utilised in various different ways. We haven't reduced the formal support from a statutory perspective in terms of what we as a council deliver. How we fund some of that has changed in the background. So, for example, English as a second or other language in recent years has been paid almost exclusively through this funding, but that's changed in terms of thriving communities picking up those costs for those staff, because it's not just for resettlement, and one post in particular continuing to be funded through this more appropriate funding stream. We've continued to commission services from third sector providers as well, along with analysis of need. So there may well be a perception that people have been using your language, not mine, dropped. That's not the case from our perspective at all. We continue to monitor the need that's there, and we will continue to do that in year, because we're aware of different policy decisions made at a Westminster and a Holyrood level around asylum seekers, etc., and the amount of funding that's coming in is changing. Sometimes on a monthly basis, it's that frequent, so we have to continue to monitor that against the demand and the usage of that money. So we're not leaving people without support. We're absolutely putting that in there. We continue to fund key third sector organisations, and that funding by and large was to similar levels as previous years, but there have been some reductions because of the numbers as well.
Councillor Darwood.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Chair, for that. So, again, it took a while for my brain to get this right, and thank you for that explanation about financing. So, settlement services funding has moved into service reserves and it's being utilised for more than one purpose. Okay, and that's fair enough. That's a budget decision. Social work deal with resettlement specifically, and education deal with ESOL, lifelong learning. Kind of, right? In my simplistic perspective. So, what you're saying about resettlement is that you've contracted services out to the third sector. Do you have any staff still in the social work directorate that deal with resettlement? Because I'm repeating, the word dropped is the word that I had from third sector providers or concerned individuals working with refugees. The refugees' perspective is they're no longer getting a service from social work. That's the concern that they have. So I'm reporting that back. You're saying that's not the case. Why would they be saying that if that isn't the case? That's my concern. And what's happened in the interim? Is there a gap between services being commissioned and services ongoing? I don't know, but why would people be reporting that concern if it wasn't the case? Thank you.
Okay, so in relation to the first part, then yes, we transferred staff who deal with resettlement activity from thriving communities into social work on the 1st of July this year. There was no break in service. The same staff moved across, the same line manager, but the senior management level changed. Their duties and functions haven't been changed. Why people say what they say, Councillor Darwood, I can't answer that question. It might have been concern around the changes. There was an awful lot of discussion and some concern about what was happening at the time, and sometimes that level of concern can relate into perception that isn't factual, and that's really the only way I can respond to that element of question. How people feel, what they're experiencing, how they feel is out with my control, what they experience is within our control, but we are absolutely meeting those needs.
Yeah, Councillor Darwood.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for indulging me. If I take this off table, perhaps, and bring these issues to your team, that might be a better way of dealing with it, the actual relevant individuals, yeah? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Drysdale.
Yeah, thanks very much. I don't have the full experience, obviously, here, Councillor Dorward, but I know there's been 2 emails sent out recently with courses specifically for refugees and others, and language courses that I've just managed to hopefully assist, get some, you know, have a constituent go on. So there's certainly something been happening quite proactively within the third sector. And there's 4 courses currently just been launched, so I don't know if that's of any help. I'm just trying to find the email and I'll forward it on to yourself, or yourself, Stephen, and you could forward it out to the councillors. But there certainly seems to have been a movement in the language assistance, and also some assistance through the third sector for people applying for visas and things. That's all online at the moment. So I don't know, it's maybe just, the comms are maybe just coming through for that, but I've just seen it recently, so I'll forward it on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Any other questions for... Okay, members, that takes us on to recommendations. Members are asked to note the 2.1, the budget realignment that has been undertaken with Social Work Services Management Team to ensure that the budgets reflected for each service function represents planned income and expenditure levels for the year ahead, as detailed in sections 4.1 to 4.3. 2.2, the extent of additional resources allocated to social work services to support children's residential placements, with current forecasts anticipated to exceed the £3 million budget pressure funding provided as part of the 2025-26 budget setting process. 2.3, that a report will be brought forward to the next meeting providing an update on the number of children within a residential placement and with measures currently being progressed to address the pressure. 2.4, that the information from the detailed budget realignment has been reviewed in conjunction with the Q1 monitoring information and highlighted that it is estimated that social work services will return £448,000 overspend at the end of the financial year, as detailed in Appendix 1, thus requiring the identification and progression of further budget control and mitigation measures. And finally, 2.5, there are risks that this projected overspend could be further increased, requiring close monitoring and associated mitigation measures to address both these risks and the current projected overspend reflected above. Members happy to approve? Thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item number 6, the Integration Joint Board Q1 Budget Monitoring, Social Work Delegated Budget. This report provides members with an overview of the current monitoring position against the social care budgets that are delegated by the Council to the Integration Joint Board. Given the extent of the IJB overspending incurred in 2024-25 and the projected position for the current year, it was agreed that in addition to ongoing reporting to the IJB, monitoring reports for services delegated to the IJB by the Council will be reported to this committee, something that I warmly welcome. And Stephen Morgan is available to take any questions. Thank you. And colleagues. Do we have any questions? Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Certainly very much welcomed, and it's long overdue. Also welcome the move to update Social Work Services Committee regularly on this issue. Isn't it amazing how the requirement to make savings can focus minds collectively? For this topic, I'm just going to, I've already said I have a role as an IGB voting member, and I'm scrupulous in ensuring I act and role when part of that board. But today I'm commenting on this paper as a local councillor, just representing constituents and taxpayers in Dumfries and Galloway and representing Dumfries and Galloway Council. And I think that's legitimate and it's quite separate. I want to actually move a motion about the funding cuts. So the report's really good. It is a financial report and it's fairly black and white and fairly cold in that sense, but I understand that. But it does paint a very grim financial picture ahead, Dumfries and Galloway Council delegated social care budgets to the IGB, and 3.3 on page 4 is calling this 12.5 even million deficit unprecedented, but I would suggest hardly unexpected given what's been happening in previous years with funding. Brokerage previously provided by Scottish Government to NHS and Fleece and Galloway is not forthcoming for this financial year, and combined with a dearth of general reserves and fully committed ring-fence reserves, the IGB for the first time required an additional 1.8 million or thereabouts from Dumfries and Galloway Council to break even in the last financial year in terms of delegated services. The identified funding gap of 12.5 million at Appendix 1, page 11, names the top 4 most existing pressures on IGB delegated funding. And these existing pressures are older people, physical disability support, learning disability support and mental health. Now it's a financial paper and these 4 cohorts are being described in this paper as existing pressures, but I'm sure that doesn't sit well with their families, friends and carers, the fact that our most vulnerable citizens are costing us too much. So as well as dealing with a pending financial crisis, we cannot collectively as elected members escape the fact that this catastrophic set of circumstances has a stark moral dimension. We've only achieved 800k of savings cuts at the end of Q1, according to this report. We have just under 12 million defined cut from our budget. And to achieve a balanced budget, it says this in the report, we need to cut services to those causing the most costly existing pressures. This is unprecedented as we are dealing with people's quality of life, expectations of service delivery, and at a very basic level, expectations of actual human contact. Now, I know my colleague, Councillor Scobie, is wanting to speak, so I'll let him speak about the third sector because he's actually trailed that in emails to councillors who attend the Social Work Committee. I won't go down that road. But I would say something's very wrong in Scotland when public sector services are failing our most vulnerable citizens and inequalities are increasing. Something's wrong with Scottish Government when their response to this crisis is to continue to demand savings which affect our most marginalised citizens. Collectively across Scotland, IGBs are facing nearly £500 million of a funding gap. Now, I have sympathy for IGB colleagues, including myself, because we will be faced with making decisions regarding apportioning funding, which is a nice way of saying cutting services, which won't be pleasant. But I'm asking the question now is, do they need to make these decisions? Dumfries and Galloway has the second highest percentage of over 65s in Scotland, and that's from the Audit Scotland report in March this year. And one of the highest percentages of people who have a long-term illness, disease or condition. So it's vital that we invest in prevention and early intervention in social care. So suggesting and moving that this year, let's focus our energies on, not on service cuts, because that's what we are focusing our energies on. A lot of folk are dealing with that, and how do we save money? How do we cut services in the least harmful way to our citizens? So let's focus our energies on service cuts, not on service cuts, sorry, but on reform, transformation, prevention and early intervention. Shift the dial, turn the whole thing around. So to do that, I move that as we as DGC, as Dumfries and Galloway Council and as elected members request that our chair writes urgently to Scottish Government to demand, and demand is the word, that identified savings of the DGC delegated social care budget are reversed and utilised by the IGB to focus on maintaining service provision whilst working with all stakeholders to reform and improve service delivery over the next year. This isn't a criticism of what staff do, by the way, because every time elected members bring concerns about service delivery, we're asked, is it about staff? It's not. We consider our healthcare staff, our third sector staff and our social work staff are doing a fantastic job at all levels. So from the senior managers to frontline staff are doing a fantastic job. What they're not getting is the financial support to do the job properly. So it's not criticism of them, but they deserve better, as do our vulnerable citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorward. We also have Nicole Hamlet online with us. Nicole, would you be able to respond to that?
Thanks very much, Chair. I think I absolutely agree in terms of the work that our frontline teams are doing and the need that's in our communities in order to meet. And there's no denying that absolutely that is what we are looking at as cuts to our services, cuts to frontline services that are delivered to people who are currently in receipt of care, in order to make the efficiency savings that are set out here. we are having those conversations, and not only is that resulting in recruitment freezes for our staff, it's also that market sustainability for us in terms of our, I know Councillor Dorward referred to the third sector, but also to our independent sector in the region. We are currently having discussions about potentially reducing the amount of care that we put out into the market, and we have to balance that with the sustainability of that market as well. We have got a number of small providers across the region, so there is an impact from the savings that we need to make, not only to the people that we're delivering the services to, our own staff, but also to the independent sector that provide those services on our behalf. So it is a significant challenge. Whilst I know the savings within the paper don't look significant, there has been a huge amount of savings. There's been a huge amount of work by our frontline teams, particularly within complex care, to look at innovation, to look at different ways of supporting people, looking at technology, looking at how we minimise the amount of hands-on care that we do. But that is being dwarfed by that growth in demand, that growth in people who have got needs due to the demographic of the population, due to the complex needs that some individuals have within the region, and they absolutely should not be a burden to us. And it is our responsibility to find different ways to work to support people, and we're doing that. We are looking at innovation, and I would hope, whilst it is a financial paper, there is a bit of a sense of the work that we are trying to do. But again, Stephen, as our Chief Social Work Officer, will be able to discuss the responsibility of trying to balance this financial obligation with our statutory obligations is really, really difficult. And I know Stephen and the team are looking very much at what the criteria is for what constitutes critical need. But again, I can't not say that this is going to involve us removing care from people who are already in receipt of care, not only those in terms of who are being assessed now in terms of their need. So the impact is significant. We are working very hard to try and ensure that our services are as efficient as they can be. I think that ability for us to redesign and focus on that early intervention prevention that Councillor Dorward referred to is key to this. And again, the IJB does have that ability to make some of those strategic decisions. But in the face of making significant cuts such as these, very hard to then invest in third sector and that early intervention and prevention at the same time. So there's not much that I can add in terms of this is, and we have got a comms plan that we've been working through, and I have quoted in that comms plan that this is going to have an impact to people across the region.
Thank you, Nicole. Councillor Dorward, are you satisfied with that?
Not satisfied, but I mean, that's not the right word. But I do appreciate your candidness, your honesty, Nicole. It's not about you I'm not satisfied with, it's the response, it's the overall inability to do more than we can do, and the financial handcuffs that we have around us that prevents us doing more, which is extremely unfortunate, hence my motion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dorward. Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. Could I maybe preface any remark I make, like Linda, is not a criticism of staff who are working very much under pressure and in extreme difficult circumstances. I did, Chair, circulate an article from the Herald of the 21st of August, and in that article, Dr. Donald McCaskill describes social care as being at an apocalyptic stage. Big word to get your tongue round. But he goes on to say social care are the Cinderella of services compared to what finances are given to the NHS. He says, and Linda described vulnerable people, but he says vulnerable people are waiting up to 16 weeks for a crucial social care package. He further says there are and there will be people who will die whilst they are waiting for a social care package. I describe the situation as a serious virtual circle in that people are being kept out of hospital, who are provided with a proper care package by virtue of having that proper care package. As soon as we withdraw that care package, or they don't have it, they end up being admitted to hospital. When they're ready for discharge, then they can't get discharged because they don't or can't get a proper care, social care package. I think the report, and Linda again referred to it on page 5, the significant £12.5 million that has to be found is going to have severe cuts on the very vulnerable people that were supposed to be there to try and serve and provide a level of care. And then 4.7, it clearly states work must be undertaken and is ongoing in identifying savings to drive efficiencies. However, the scale of savings needed to return the service to a financial balance is far beyond anything that can be solved through the marginal cuts. In that circumstances, Chair, it's questionable whether indeed we should be moving into performance framework level 4 to see if the Scottish Government could actually manage the situation and provide the level of care that people need and that we should be able to provide as a local authority, to see how they would manage this. But notwithstanding that, I would say, maybe along with what Linda was saying, and maybe different to that we shouldn't just be writing, but what I would say is a motion that I'm happy to move. There should not be a penny taken away from the social care budget, but rather we should join the massive lobby of care groups to demand more financial resources from the Health and Social Care Minister to meet that growing demand that we just heard Nicole speak of. Without that, Chair, we're going to have people, or there is a fear that people, as Dr McCaskill has said, people will die in Dumfries and Galloway, and we should be preventing that by providing the care that they need, the social care that they need. So I'm happy to move, and I'll put it on the chat for people to see. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. So, yeah, I didn't really pick up a question in there, so it's more actually trying to make an amendment and move that forward. Councillor Dorward, can you let us have the details of what your proposal was as well? Thanks.
Certainly can, Chair. If you allow me to come in for a minute, I'm happy to work with Councillor Scobie as opposed to amending a motion. I think we just extend it if Councillor Scobie is willing to do that. I don't think there's any need to amend. I think we just extend if he's willing to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to come in and second Councillor Dorward, but I totally agree. I think Willie's motion is also equally as important. It was just on page 9 at the very end of the implications and risk, and I appreciate Nicole's already said there's been a lot of work done, which we all know. So I'm just wondering, at the very end it said it's therefore important that the IGB identify, progress and deliver further savings measures to address the current projected overspend. So I'm just wondering what those savings might look like. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nicole, can you assist? Thanks.
Certainly, Chair. I'm not sure who else is in the room, but Matthew might be there from a financial point of view to add. Again, just to reiterate a couple of points, and just picking up on Councillor Scobie's points as well. We have been very successful in the last year in reducing our delayed discharges as one measure, and again that's due to the phenomenal work of our frontline teams. And when I say that, I'm not just meaning those employed by both the local authority and health, our independent sector and our third sector. Our delayed discharges are lower than they have ever been since COVID, and are now sitting in the kind of mid-60s, where previously we had been at about 120. So there's been a huge amount of improvement work done by teams. Again, for me, some of that is at risk from the work that we would need to do, because in response to the last question, The only way for us to meet this level of financial savings is us to reduce the amount of care that we are delivering. That is the only way that this can be achieved. And there's no other way to so it is going to require us to be working with a Chief Social Work Officer to really define what that criteria is for essential need only, which predominantly we work to. It is about every time we get a package handed back that we are only actually going to offer 50% of that back out, because we need to reduce. Then if we can only afford to deliver 44,000 hours of care across the region, and we currently are delivering about, I think it's about 49,000. So we do need to make cuts to the levels of care that we could do. Now, obviously, we're going to try and mitigate that. We do need to look at an EQIA process. We do need to make sure that we're working to protect the most vulnerable across our region. And I have got no doubt that that will be the forefront of our social workers and their practice. But ultimately, in order for us to deliver this level of financial savings, there is a number of schemes that are on the table that we can discuss in detail, but they are going to reduce the amount of services that we offer. There's no other way to describe that.
Thank you, Nicole.
Wonder if I could come back.
Matthew, is there anything that you could add to that? Thanks.
Sorry, yeah, I'd probably say that we do have a long list of things that we're currently working through. Some of them are a little bit sensitive at the moment, so we can't disclose specifics today, but we are trying to mitigate any actual impact on care delivery, but we have a lot of areas we need to really understand what's actually been delivered, whether we're actually getting value for money of what we're actually paying as well at the moment. So we are trying to mitigate the impact on the actual delivery of care.
Thank you, Matthew. Now, I've got a number of speakers now. I can see that Councillor Scobie wants to come back in, but before I do, I've got Councillor Drysdale, Slater, Dashburn, and then I'll come back to Willie as a second time speaker. But before we do that, Stephen Morgan wants to make a comment.
Thank you, Chair. And not wishing to disrupt the political discussion, but Councillor Darwood, you raised an extremely important point that's close to my heart as Chief Social Work Officer in relation to our most vulnerable and blaming, you know, them for this overspend. And that's not what was intended by this report. And I just want to be clear that from a social justice and a non-judgmental and a humanistic perspective, which is some of the key values of social work, there is no blame attributed. And we will make sure that language in the reports coming forward will be sensitive to that. There is no blame at all. These people are some of the most unfortunate and vulnerable, and I don't wish to sound condescending in terms of the significant needs that they have from a medical and care perspective, and we are well aware of that. I just wanted to respond to that point that you made specifically, because it is a very important one, and as a social worker, very close to my heart. So thank you, Chair, for allowing me and to indulge me in that.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Drysdale.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for those points, Stephen. I would like to commend the Interim Chief Exec, Nicole, for the hard work she's carried out over the last couple of years, and I know we have a new Interim Chief Exec coming on board. I want to speak from the heart here, and hopefully my fellow councillors can really understand where I'm coming from. We know that our existing pressures are on older people, our most vulnerable in our communities, and from my perspective, I see the system struggling because I have someone I look after in Ayrshire. It works there because in Ayrshire we have the support for the care home teams to come in and look after people with elderly people with really complex needs, because we have the support at home, and the geography really works in Ayrshire because of the population density. It's really difficult watching our amazing care teams work across the rural west and the rural east, because when we speak to them, they quite happily report back to us that they're sitting in a car all day, and often when they get to the calls, they can't actually deal with the complex situations they have. At the IJB meeting, which I sat through, which was most interesting, I think it was about last year, was it, Chair? I can't remember, year and a half ago, we talked about right care, right place, and I attended almost all of the seminars in the West, listening to the plans afoot, and I totally understand why we want to be able to reach that stage of people being looked at home. But unfortunately, we see in the East and the West, residents who've moved up here, elderly people getting a good value property and then having to leave again and sell up and try and move south because they can't have a care package because they have no family to support them with that care package, unlike in the more city and more central belt areas where it actually does work. I really see it struggling here because we just don't have the backup support, which is why I went to the press and why I went to the Scottish Government and said, in the interim, we really have to look at redundant hotels that have been used for elderly people. And time again, I have emailed Nicole, who's been extremely supportive, and I'm still waiting on a date. I have been offered a date to meet with somebody within the Health and Social Care Partnership, and Stephen's been most supportive of that and is willing to attend that meeting. We can work in our own way in rural areas like Highlands and Islands, and we need to be doing that in Dumfries and Galloway. We don't have the time anymore to sit talking about it again and again and again. Please, everyone in this meeting, help and support me. Have this meeting at the site that I wish to have it in and look at my vision for health and social care, because unless we do this, we are not going to sort out this problem. And I actually think it is spend to save rather than, in fact, immediately I think it would make a saving and would help in this interim stages for people who have the ability to leave hospital. They're not being peg fed, they're not being removed with a hoist, they're more able to move, but they're waiting for their package, their power of attorney package to come in, for example, or they're waiting for their care at home package to be put in place, and therefore it would help with the delayed discharge. So I'm really hopeful that somehow we can incorporate this into the motion today, and I would really plead with my fellow councillors to take on board where I'm coming from, and more than happy, as I've said in my emails, for anyone to meet with me if we can have that meeting arranged. So hopefully everyone can take that on board. I really appreciate you listening to this today. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. There wasn't an actual question in there, was there? It was just you're putting forward a point of view and that you're happy to support the motions. That
I am, Chair, but I'd like some way, if possible, if that can be incorporated, that we can look at in the motion. If we could read, yeah, I think Councillor Dorward's taken that on board, so I'm quite happy if you are as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker, Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's regarding the amount of savings that has to be made and why has it really got to that level? Because in business, budgets are very, very important. And if you start running over, you try to bring it back. You look at early measures to try and solve that. Because once a budget reaches the half-year point, it's almost impossible to bring it back online. So should there be maybe more scrutiny on the budgets at earlier stages to try and change the amount of money that you have to save, possibly, and maybe save that money, because obviously it looks as if the poorest in the community are going to suffer greatly from these large cuts. So I just feel that it should have been maybe better managed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slater. Matthew, do you want to highlight the processes that we have in place? Thank you.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't actually disagree with you. There probably should have been more scrutiny. There probably should have been more review earlier. I've only been here 8 weeks, and I'm trying to understand the numbers of where we are, what we've got, what we can do. I'm working obviously with Stephen and others to see where we're going. I believe, from my understanding, the gap was actually known back in November, December last year. I couldn't actually tell you why we still got the same significant gap. I do know some of the savings that have materialised have been worked on since November, December last year. So a lot of them do take time to actually be put in place. I think what we're seeing, though, in recent months and in Q1 is the actual demand for new care and additional care packages coming through are having a further impact over and above what's materialising. So savings have been delivered, some have actually been put in place, some will be coming online soon, but the pressure continues to come in, and there was no growth forecast in the actual budget and within the actual amount that was delegated across. So there are definite lessons to be learned, and we'll try and build them forward and make sure we have a clearer understanding of what we need to do. Similar with requests for additional funding, probably too early to actually ask, but I'd like to table it as that would have been nice as an option, Should it have been looked at? Possibly. I'm just here to try and actually help and to work with colleagues to see what we can do to ensure we can move forward in a better way.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, it's good that you're going to look at budgets more closely and over a shorter period of time, because the earlier you can catch these situations, the more chance you have probably of trying to resolve them. But if they're in a hand, it becomes almost impossible. Thank you very much for that information. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Stephen wants to add something to that, David.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Slater. I think there's an important distinction to make, and it's right of you to compare this situation with our private business. However, private businesses are run for very different reasons. You know, we as, local government, as part of the state, if you like, are here to protect the most vulnerable, and it's not as clear-cut as a profit margin. I know you're well aware of that. In terms of why we're here, there are a combination of factors, and I think it's worth me pointing those out in addition to the detail that's in the report. Councillor Dawood made reference to the Audit Scotland report earlier in this meeting. It's actually 530 million of a gap, and that's just for adult social work and social care, not the entirety of what IJBs are facing. There's been no additional investment for adult social work or social care in the past 3 years. What the Scottish Government have done is they've increased a similar amount of money for fair pay, which is absolutely the right thing to do, but that's also increased the costs for us. So the costs have gone up because of the right policy, the ethically and morally right things to do, but because of our demand in terms of older people, and the second highest in Scotland, the second fastest growing older population, that demand is increasing. From a professional and legal perspective, social workers have to assess need. We can't not do that. What we then have to do is see if that need can or can't be delivered. And that's not just about money. So the 12+ million pounds we're speaking about here isn't cuts, it's such. It's money that we are spending that we never had. And that's an important distinction. And we have to try and control that as best we can. And that is extremely difficult. And it will be painful for some of our citizens and for many of our staff as well. So, it is a really difficult position to be in. Not trying to defend anything there, it's just, giving some facts and additional information into the whole situation as to where we are. Matthew's absolutely right in terms of, how this has been highlighted. And this is the first time we've brought this level of information to this committee from an elected member and council perspective, and we will continue to do that as we move forward. In terms of scrutiny, I think it's important to say that, there's and I warned colleagues this morning not to use the phrase I'm about to use. We have a round table discussion which is chaired by the Council's Chief Executive, and it's got many of the senior officers and others that are in this room to my right who are looking at this in significant detail, and the scrutiny is something that I've never witnessed in the past. It is positive, it is uncomfortable, but it is actually essential right now in terms of where we are. So our local position, the national position is difficult, but for all of the reasons discussed by yourselves and some of the input from officers today, explains why it's even harder in Dumfries and Galloway. 6,500 square kilometres, 150,000 people, with a third of those in and around Dumfries. It's an extremely difficult set of circumstances to try and meet the needs of the most vulnerable. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And I think that increased level of scrutiny means that we're all got eyes on it, and it means that we're all understanding of what the situation is. The fact that this is coming to us so late in the day is really down to our processes. The fact that we as a council haven't fully appreciated the responsibilities and the liabilities that are involved in relation to the IJB, and I'm really pleased to welcome it coming forward, and I think it is the way forward. Councillor Dashper.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of the motions that have been lodged, if we can get an official form of words for what members are suggesting, and perhaps, because it sounds quite complex and everyone wants to add things to it. I appreciate Councillor Scobie's put something in the Teams chat, but maybe we can just get something on email for members to fully read for their own qualified consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I did intend to conclude taking questions, then we'll have a brief recess to allow members to have a look at that. Councillor Scobie is second time speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, it was really just to come back on Nicole, or rather what Nicole said, and I'm pleased to hear Nicole advising us that delayed discharges are reducing. This is something I've been raising for years in terms of the number of delayed discharges and how they've continually increased. But even at 60, that Nicole said, it is far too high in terms of delayed discharge. And my fear is that that'll increase if we start withdrawing on care packages to people, the most vulnerable in our society. And I think it was spelled out by Stephen there as the chief social worker, just how big a demand there is on it. And when there's that demand, for us then to be reducing it would have a serious and detrimental effect on the people who need it most. So that's why I put the motion. Quite happy for the motion, what Linda, or rather what Linda was moving, to be extended, not just to right, but I think we should join that lobby and meet physically with the Health Minister to put our case, because we do need an increase in financial resources if we're ever going to tackle that 12.5 million of a funding gap, rather than inflict punishment on the vulnerable people in our society, in our region. So I'm quite happy to have it extended rather than an amendment on Linda's motion that she put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Scobbett. Councillor Dorward.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for preempting my suggestion of a recess to examine this and perhaps have a combined motion that takes on suggestions from Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Scobie. Happy to combine that into one if people are agreeable to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale, can I ask, have you got a form of words or anything that you particularly wish to contribute in relation to that as mentioned earlier?
No, but I'm happy to pull something together. I wouldn't, if it's allowable under governance, to speak to Linda in the recess. Is that acceptable? Yourself as well, Chair, if you wish.
Yeah, well, what I'll do is I'll propose a recess for 15 minutes at the moment. We can come back, have a look at what we have and probably break again for another short break, and we'll take it from there if that's okay. So we'll now recess for 15 minutes. Thanks. Welcome back, members. If you have a look at the screen, we now have details of the motion. I'm assuming everyone online has been afforded a copy, yeah? They can see that? Okay. Councillor Dawood.
Chair, thanks for that. Unfortunately, we hadn't actually finished our discussions, and there's a third iteration that includes additional information from Councillor Scobie that I've sent to Claire and Councillor Scobie right now. So if that could be put up instead, if respectfully request, that is the motion that we have agreed collectively. Well, some of us have agreed collectively at the moment.
Sorry, can I just clarify that what we're going to do is we're now going to put up an alternative to that one, that one's...
We hadn't finished our discussions when you opened the meeting again, and we were in the middle of actually of the third iteration of the motion, which took into account Councillor Scobie's additional amendments, which have now been put in. I've sent that to Claire for the for perusal of every committee member to see if that's fine to be
okay, I'll ask
on. Thank you.
I'll ask members to bear with us. I shan't adjourn right at this point. I'll bring in Councillor Scobie in a second, and if Claire, you can send that across and we can have that put up next. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, happy to do the extended motion, Linda's motion that she shared with me, and she's put in my suggestion. So I'm happy to second Linda's motion.
Can I just clarify that's the one we're just about to see?
That's the one Claire has been copied into. So
thank you. One. Just ask members to bear with us while we sort the IT on that. Thank you. Okay, members, we should now have this. It's the third iteration, if we have a read through that.
Point of clarification, Chair. Ah, sorry, I see it now. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, members should have had sufficient time to have read through that. Do we have any comments? Councillor Drysdale.
Just one. It's just one we amend, just after, in this, I can't see it now, but after the word financial, I think it just needs to say resources, it's missing, second last paragraph, demand an increase of financial resources, and that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments from members? Councillor Dashper.
Yeah, thank you. Just clarity around the collective lobbying group in terms of the terms of reference for that. What's the governance around that? Will that come to this committee for approval, or? Thank you.
If I can put that to some of the people who formulated the motion, do they have a perspective that they'd like to give us on it? And Claire, do we have any particular governance issues around that?
No, there's no particular issues around from governance about lobbying groups. Thank you. It's free for the committee to determine. There's governance in place for things like member officer working groups and such like, but the committee can determine who they would like on that lobbying group.
Okay, thank you for that, Claire. If there's any of the members who helped formulate the motion would like to give us an indication as to how that would proceed and how it would be progressed, thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Thanks, Chair. Do you want to go in first, Councillor Dorward? It was just to suggest possibly someone from the IGB, someone from the council that represents the Health and Social Care Partnership, and one member from each group. Political group, to me, would be the sensible way forward from this committee, but I'm happy to take, obviously it's Councillor Dorward and Councillor Scobie's motion, but and perhaps Stephen Morgan as Chair of Social Work Directorate would be sensible as well, but happy to take on board your views as well, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Yeah, I'm interested to understand how this will function. Yeah, we can formulate a group, we can identify the people who are going to be into it. I'm interested to understand more clearly how that would work and what it would be intended to do, how often it would meet, how often it would meet, and how we would actually lobby and who would lobby. Thank you. Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair. And you're asking the right questions. I totally appreciate the complexities of this motion. It's extended quite significantly. But I think we can use the A75-77 lobbying group as a template for that. That was formed as a cross-party group, again, out of concerns about the lack of funding and dualling for those two roads. So I think if we take it off table, speak to officers involved in that, we can use that template to form this group. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, there is precedence going back many years, and indeed it was myself, Joe McKee, and members from the political groups at that time that lobbied the Minister of the day with regards to kinship care, and that followed a briefing paper produced by the then Chief Social Worker. So there is precedence, and it's a matter of then getting a meeting with the Minister and for that lobbying group then to meet and put forward their case. I would hope when I mentioned COSLA, that because I'm sure there are other authorities facing similar difficulties, that could be extended to COSLA to add weight to the lobby. Just the sheer need for that increased resources on the increase in demand on social care that Stephen Morgan referred to earlier. So there is precedent, and the other one is, as Linda said, the A77, A75 lobbying group.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Scobie. Sorry, can you just help me understand your reference to COSLA there? Thanks.
Yeah, Chair, and I'm sure the representative, social work representative in COSLA could take this to COSLA and introduce it as a subject and see if there's other local authorities and the 32 authorities facing in similar circumstances, and to strengthen that lobbying group through COSLA.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thanks for the clarification. Okay, anyone else wish to comment on this motion? Okay, it sounds like we've got unanimous apathy, so therefore nobody's speaking up. against it. So, yes, we have a unanimous decision that we're going to support this motion going forward, that I will write to the Scottish Government. Abby, can we just put that back up again, just so I can confirm what my responsibilities are? Thank you. I will write to the Scottish Government, demand that additional funding is provided in order to identify savings of a DGC delegated social care budget be reversed and utilised by the IJB. Is there something in there that we should be writing to the IJB? Because ultimately they have responsibility for managing that delegated budget. And should there be something there about the Barnett consequentials coming to the Scottish Government and how we can make sure or try to drive that we get that from the Government? Councillor Dorward.
Chair, we've already agreed the motion. Unless you're proposing to change it now, and you've already said, used the term unanimous apathy, but we've actually agreed the motion, so if you want to add additions, you have to add an amendment. Thank you.
Thank you for that. No, I'm not looking to amend it. I was just voicing my thoughts. Thank you. No problem. Okay, so we've agreed that that's the motion. If I can then move on to the recommendations, unless there's any further conversation want to be had on this paper item. Okay, and the recommendations are 2.1, significant. We note the significant financial pressure the delegated services are under, as outlined in Appendix 1. The unprecedented amount of savings that need to be delivered to achieve a balanced position in 2025-2026. 2.3, the financial position at the end of June 2025, Q1, is outlined in Appendix 3. 2.4, the current progress of delivering identified savings as outlined in Appendix 2.1 and the level of additional savings that are still need to be identified and delivered in 2025-26 to avoid overspending. And 2.5, the arrangements currently being progressed to provide enhanced council support to the IJB in addressing the challenging, including the provision of non-recurring spend to save funding to support services, change and cost reduction measures. Greater direct involvement of senior council officers in providing support to the IJB Interim Chief Officer, Interim Chief Financial Officer, and their wider management team in the identification, development and progression of the required changes, and enhanced levels of council committee reporting and engagement with council members in relation to IJB financial monitoring and progress on the service changes and cost reduction measures that are required to be progressed. And 2.6 will be the motion. Is that everything clear? Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 7. Children's House Inspection, May 2025. This report provides members with an update on the most recent unannounced inspection of Hardthorne Road Children's House in Charles Rock. We'll be happy to take questions. Charles, anything you want to add to that before members' questions?
Yes, I just want to recognise this was a follow-up inspection from September 2024. It's identified an improvement in our grade from adequate to good, very much recognising what I'd highlighted last year to committee around the improvement work that the team within the Children's House and the external manager has taken forward. We're incredibly proud of that work, caring and supporting our most valuable children in the Children's House and demonstrating that improvement. And just want to recognise my personal thanks to the team for this inspection. Thank you.
Members' questions? Councillor Dashper.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I welcome the updated review of us, and it's good to see we've gone up to good rating. Just wondering, in terms of the updated action plan, what's the timeline for that, and when will members be informed about further progress to fulfil that? Thank you.
Yeah, so the action plan improvement is the oversight and governance sits within the social work governance group within that, who scrutinises that. We're making good progress in regards to timescales. It wasn't the intention to bring back an action plan through this committee, very much recognising the improvement trend and the reassurance that that would be seen and taken within the service itself. Thank you.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. Just obviously this is fantastic to see such an improvement, and well done to all the staff involved. I do know that there's still some action to be taken. When will that, or when do we expect that those recommendations to be met? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Through yourself, Chair, the inspector that came, it's not given a timescale for that. In terms of the next inspection, that will go part of our sort of normal cycle. For inspection, the action plan, as I say, is noted, will be going through the social work governance group to track the improvement areas for that. We're already seeing areas that we're meeting within that, and that's part of an overall improvement plan that was put in place from last year. In terms of timescales, some of these are kind of embedded within other areas of practice within the social work planning, picked up around smart plans, and that sits with other areas of improvement that sits within the social work service. So, as I said, it wasn't intention to bring back the action plan for review through committee, but if members are reassured that that would be the oversight that will sit within the social work governance arrangements.
Thank you, Charles. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like to say thank you very much, Charles, having had a little bit of involvement as past chair of this committee, but I really commend the report and all the hard work that you and your team, headed up with Stephen and everyone actually at the children's home. I know how much energy and effort you put in behind this, so well done, and if you could pass our thanks on to the team. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Any other questions? If there are no further questions, we'll go on to recommendations. Members are asked to note 2.1, the recent increase in our evaluations from the unannounced visit, which took place on 21st and 22nd of May 2025, as outlined in the appendix in section 3.3 of the report. And 2.2, the progress in appointing a permanent house manager after a significant period of managing an interim position, as outlined in section 4.4 of the report. Thank you. Okay, we move on to item number 8, which is the Chief Social Work Officer's Annual Report 2024-2025. And this report has been prepared to share with elected members the Chief Social Work Officer Annual Report for 2024-25, which is produced to satisfy the requirement to prepare and publish the said report in relation to the Chief Social Work Officer's role in professional leadership, oversight of practice, governance, values, and standards as described in national guidance. The report also relates to specific areas of decision-making and practice where legislation confers functions directly upon the Chief Social Work Officer. This provides an overview of the activities and performance of social work services, providing information on the statutory decisions made by the CSWO on behalf of the Council, and highlights key challenges for the service. In this reporting period, the Chief Social Work Officer has led a range of improvement and assurance activities, evaluation and associated performance reporting, and service initiatives including responding to the ongoing demands, expectations and risks associated with living in the modern world. This report outlines the continuing challenging context for social work services in Dumfries and Galloway, arising from the growth and demand for services, service complexity, new legislative responsibilities, specific financial and workforce pressures, and how the services responded to these challenges. Against this background, the overall performance of the social work service has improved with identified areas of achievement which are reflected in the report. And Stephen Morgan is here to take questions. Members have any questions? Councillor Jameson.
Thanks, Convener. I'm referring to page 55, the introduction to the service report, particularly to paragraph 3. It mentions budget efficiencies and savings, and also where we agreed as a committee where we felt that there was an advantage in investing. I'm talking in particular about the dedicated kinship care team and the intensive support outreach team, which we agreed to fund. Could you briefly remind us of the objectives of these two initiatives? Secondly, what outputs have you managed to achieve, and have we reached any objectives that were sort of premised by the introduction of these groups? Thank you.
Yeah, Charles, could you assist us with that? Thanks.
Through yourself, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Jameson, for the question. I'll start with the kinship support team. The basis of that was evidence that had been identified as a huge gap around support provision for children who were within kinship arrangements, with families looking at the additional capacity around parenting supports and the complexities of children in kinship arrangements to ensure that these families had additional scaffolding support to enable them to care and love for their children. There was examples provided to members around that in terms of the impact that had, particularly around the breakdown in kinship family arrangements that required then children to be cared for elsewhere within our care system, either within foster care or within external residential care. We highlighted a measure for us was that between 40 and 50% of the children who were placed within external residential care, the backdrop and one of the kind of crisis points of being received into care was they were from a kinship family breakdown. And members at that time very much recognised that, that there was a good evidence base to do something different. One of the outputs of that is that particularly since the team's been in place, we've seen a significant reduction in breakdown within kinship arrangements, which has allowed the adaptability and flexibility of that support to be there and target that need to provide additional support for carers. And it also enhances the community links for kinship care groups that looks to connect at a community level in a far more coordinated way. The opportunity to meet the kinship care team last month and to see some of the fantastic work that they're doing, and if there's an interest in that, Councillor Jameson, I'm happy to connect with you and that to see the visibility of that, to hear from the team, because it's quite a remarkable change. Moving on to the intensive support team, again that was based on an evidence around children who we recognise on that ages of care, predominantly between the ages of 12 to 16, who were also at times in conflict with law in the community, a number of factors that were impacting on them in terms of their well-being and outcomes that placed them at risk, and to try and support that level of need to provide that intensity around support, which includes evenings and weekends, where sometimes some of the kind of crisis points hit children and families. That team's been in place both from the east and the west of the region to make sure we've got additionality within that. Right now, what we're hoping for is the evidence and output of that to reassure members in terms of its effectiveness is also through our overall reduction in the need for external care and residential. However, to kind of balance that in terms of the time to embed, we've taken forward additional training for the team to support a practice model to ensure that we are able to manage kind of children's rights and complex need in the community, working with our multi-agency partners. So I'll caveat that within that in terms of how we need to embed that and allow that team to flourish. But at this stage, we're incredibly proud of the development and the work they've done so far, and some amazing examples. Again, I would happily kind of profile about actually holding risk and promoting children's rights in communities and trying to think of this from a contextual aspect of wider community risks. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's really helpful. It might be helpful if a future committee we get a little bit more of an update, because it's money that's invested that clearly you feel is important and it looks like it's working. So it would be very, very useful if we had that context, just to see if it could be, if it's well enough resourced, if it is being cost effective, etc. So that it sounds as if it's hitting the mark. It would be really useful to get that evidential information. That would be really useful, I think. Thank you.
Stephen?
Yeah, Councillor Jimson, that's an important point, and sorry for jumping in ahead of Charles, but we're going to bring a report to the next committee looking at the overall kind of challenges in our children's residential and the mitigating monies that were brought, so we'll bring some of that evidence. Something that Charles didn't reference because he's modest, but I will, is a month or so ago we had a visit from colleagues from the Scottish Government to look at the kinship care team and the way that it's been set up and managed. And they actually seen that as an example of excellent practice, and they would like to see other local authorities across the country develop similar things. So Charles is quite modest. I'm not, on his behalf and his team and the excellent work that they do. So just wanted to shine a light on that as well in terms of that external, informal recognition from colleagues from the Scottish Government.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, and unsurprisingly, I'm going to reference the Justice social work, which they don't get a lot of kudos or credit for the work they do. Not from members, from managers, yes, from members, no, perhaps. So, unsurprisingly, I'll go back to that. Always impressed with the work they're doing, especially well, in community and in custodial setting. And certainly, I would like to refer to page 74 in terms of community payback orders and unpaid work, and the expansion of partnership working there, which is phenomenal, and actually helping local community, which actually helps the local community, but also helps the individuals involved in terms of their own self-esteem and reintegrating back into their communities, which is fantastic. So more strength to you for that one. I know that probably requires some more funding, but we won't go down that road just now. Could always do with more funding, but always impressed with the work that's being done there, and would like to put on record that we'll probably be back again to visit the Annan Depot at some point in time from our group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dorward. Councillor Stevenson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on page 76 to 77, there's the Caledonian Women's Service case study, and I don't think we can underestimate how important that is for women that are, you know, suffering from domestic abuse, and especially when it mentions that the children aren't forgotten either, because that's really important. But I've raised it at this committee before, and I'm going to raise it again. And to be fair, it's somewhere between here and education. I visited the justice setting in my ward, and we discussed the Caledonian service that they provide, and we discussed it quite length about the behaviour change group work. Now, to me, that's reactive in the sense that it happens after something awful's happened in the household. But I do feel that it's something like this delivered in school would be much more preventative to actually challenge the behaviours that we're seeing before they actually escalate and progress. And, you know, we see it more online now, some of the influencers that we get, some of the conversations they have. I'm just not entirely convinced what we deliver in schools is actually strong enough to counteract that before that behaviour gets embedded. Is there, and again I've asked before, but is there any way that the group work that gets done in there could actually be rolled out into schools, probably more so at the more advanced levels as opposed to maybe primary and S1, S2? Thank you.
Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Stevenson. It's a really valid point, and the Caledonian scheme is well evidenced, you know, and has really positive outcomes. The difficulty, though, is that the scheme is designed for adults, and it looks at the psychology and human behaviour of adults, and that behaviour change that you've referenced yourself, and Councillor Dorward referenced as well. In terms of school children, just in terms of their development from a neurodiverse perspective and how we do that would be different. So we wouldn't want to use that particular model. But I do know that there is work ongoing in schools around, you know, attitudes towards misogyny, etc. So we'll certainly continue to work with our colleagues, because you're right, prevention is key. And a lot of justice work is reactive because people have been caught committing a crime, convicted or pled guilty to that crime, and then the justice team comes in. But the emphasis of their work is absolutely on stopping that crime in the future. So even though we're reacting to the event, it's a proactive approach in terms of reducing offending. And can I just say thank you for your kind words for that team. They often feel forgotten in the grand scheme of social work because they are so niche, but they are brilliant, and I add my thanks to yours. Charles, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add in relation to your work in children's services?
Yeah, you know, one of the, you know, we really see that the success of the Caledonian programme, we need to recognise that we're probably one of the few authorities that stretch beyond just the kind of mandate from court. We do it from licence conditions from post-prison, because we recognise the kind of programmes of work are not necessarily able to be offered in the same way. We kind of have a vision of trying to extend that out to support on a voluntary basis to families where there is conflict and there's evidence of domestic harm, where we're not necessarily doing it without a kind of court mandate of an order that stipulates that as part of a sort of public protection offer. However, to kind of be mindful of that through the Caledonian programme, we have been informed that there is a reduction in the funding for Caledonian programme as such through the current methodology that's been quantified by government. So we have written to government highlighting and profiling the need for this through a public protection lens as well, but also the intentions of us to kind of take it within an early intervention context as well. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just like I say, I think sometimes when we talk about our more kind of older children, we sometimes don't appreciate what we're up against, because what they're hearing and seeing, you know, it's not designed for children, but we're trying and influence them by things that are designed. I'm not saying this very well, but designed for children, and I sometimes don't think that we kind of get that balance right, and I know it's really, really difficult, but like I say, I was really impressed with the programme when I saw it, and I'm quite disappointed to hear that the funding's not there as well as it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Slater.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's regarding unpaid work. Is it possible that sometimes these people have unpaid work could maybe help clean up some of our local cemeteries? Is that possible? Because some are quite run down and they need a little bit of attention. Is it possible they could maybe paint the railings and things like that? It maybe need fixed. Or, you know, the grass as well, when it's cut down, it's just spread all over the gravestones. So I don't know if community service could help there at all. Just a question, thank you.
Charles?
Thanks for yourself, Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor. There are strict regulations around sometimes the scope of unpaid work, which I'd be happy to have a conversation with to maybe explain that, but we've got to be careful around the sort of the public task and any other areas of work that might necessarily undertake those duties and responsibilities, that it's not replacing or replicating that work. There are other schemes of unpaid work that they do that are really community-based, that there are gaps and there are areas where there's kind of community discussions and community consultation that takes place to help support that, but we've got to be mindful about the sort of the strict regulations around the use of that.
Just one other point, Chair. It's regarding town centre. A number of people say, you know, they're doing community service, but nobody really sees them around the town as such. Is there a reason for that or not? Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Chair. I probably take that as a good sign of that piece of work, that we're not necessarily identifying those in that particular way. And we need to appreciate this from a values perspective, in respect of people's ability to change and not necessarily be identified within communities in that way, because it can maybe give an appropriate connotation or label that's attached to that. We need to commend those who undertake unpaid work. You know, it's part of that restorative approach to change, and we have great evidence of members of our society who have turned their lives around and contributed back within that. And I think part of that feedback they've talked to us is about the stigma that they may feel at that period of time, and really wanted to be integrated back, and that's it, in communities as best they can. So hopefully that gives a bit of context of maybe why they're not necessarily as visible as maybe from your perspective or other members of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Councillor Dashburn.
Yeah, thanks for the report. Page 66 mentions Magic Notes, the AI app. Just wondering about, I mean, it says we've spent, staff are spending on average 6 hours a week less on paperwork because of that. I mean, that's a significant amount, and that must obviously have a monetary saving that we're making. and a saving in terms of staff's time and their own well-being as well. So that's good to see. I'm just wondering, in terms of the pilot, how long is the pilot, and is there scope for expanding it beyond it, ASP services to other services within social work? Thank you.
Stephen?
Yeah, Councillor Dashwood, thanks for the question. This report is reporting on activity from the previous financial year, so we've actually moved on. It's often difficult to report in a previous year. So the average 6 hours didn't actually have a monetary saving, because the staff in that team were working on average 9 hours over and above their contracted hours without pay. So what we've done is we've given them some of their time back for themselves. And that's an important point. I was actually going to make that point more broadly, just in terms of concluding the report following questions, but that is an important one. We've actually expanded the use of magic notes across the whole of the social work service, and we're working with partners. So Charles has just been speaking with colleagues in children's services planning, for example, extending it there. Some of our colleagues in organisational development are using the tool as well to see where we can get efficiency. So it was designed for social work as a sector, and it's very good for our needs. There are other tools out there that can be used, such as Copilot, etc., which have been used across the council. So this is an important, it's an important addition to a toolbox. But what I would like to say is that the usage of artificial intelligence in this context is not taking away the autonomy or the skill of a social worker. It's assisting them to do tasks that would otherwise take an awful lot of their time from an administrative perspective. There's no profiling, there's no analytics in this software. It is purely to record and present a note or a minute against our own standards. And I know that wasn't your question, but it's something that's quite topical in social work and broader circles right now, particularly from some social work academics. So I just wanted to make that point. Can't help myself, but, you know, remember the autonomy and the special skills that social workers have and utilise every day, and this assists them, it doesn't hinder what they do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen. Any further questions? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one quick question. Thank you very much for the report, Stephen. It's very comprehensive, and thanks for all the work that you and your teams have done, and also Avril for all the extra data that we have in some reporting. So, great report. Page 83, just with regards to delivering a new model for children's houses, which we have alluded to earlier in the meeting today, which is taking a tremendous amount of work, which we fully understand. I just wanted a bit more understanding about that. With new models of children's homes, I would see, from my perspective, that we need in place in vibrant communities surrounded by integrated transport networks, and that was referred to, I think, verbally at the last social work meeting. Stephen, I'm just wondering if you can confirm that that's the sort of model we'll be looking at, or are the new model for children's houses that we need in Dumfries and Galloway a different type of need, a different type of child with different complex needs that needs to be more rural? It's just to kind of get an understanding. I know there's reports to come forward, but I think those of us that sit in this committee might I'd really appreciate a wee bit of background. Thanks, Chair.
Stephen?
Yeah, I'll come in and deliberately so, chair of the committee, politely said, oh, Stephen Charles has taken the questions at your report, but I'll come on to that and why in a minute or two as well. But in relation to this specific question, absolutely, Councillor Drysdale, we're looking at having children's houses that are ordinary houses, because our children are extraordinary and exceptional, all of them, but ordinary by definition as well. So we want them to be in neighbourhoods where we have those links to further supports, to education, you know, to shops, you know, to football parks, everything else. So yes, and transport links. So that's the model we're looking at. What Charles and his team are also doing, though, is looking at what do we need in addition to that, and how do we, you know, look at some of those very specific types of placement that we would still have to procure, as he's already stated earlier on today, for some of the more specialised elements. But we are looking for ordinary homes for extraordinary children.
Thank you, Stephen. You happy with that? Thank you. If there are no other questions, Stephen, do you just want to sum up? Thank you.
Yeah, I asked the chair of the committee if I could just come in at the end, because this report is the first of my Chief Social Work Officer reports since the reorganisation of the council, and this one technically belongs to me and only me, whereas previous ones belonged to me and my predecessor. I think referencing the new council structure is really important because previously the social work service only had one chief officer, and that was the chief social work officer. And then there was two senior managers and locality managers. The investment in the additional chief officer for social work, although controversial to some, has certainly assisted me in my duties. And the reason that I've deferred a lot of questions to Charles today is because I've delegated formally some of those decision-making powers, although they still remain with myself in terms of accountability, and also because it's a team effort. We've spoken today about the tremendous pressures that are around in relation to meeting need and demand that continue, and it's a team effort to get to where we need to be. And we've had exceptional support from other council directorates in relation to procurement, finance and legal support around some of these issues as well. But what I will say is the context of what our frontline staff, and it's our frontline staff, deliver day to day has never been harder. Councillor Dashford mentioned, the 6 hours, and we've given people their own time back, not given them time back to initiate cuts or do anything different, and it is improving their well-being, and hopefully we will be able to evidence that in future workforce reports in terms of turning around sickness levels, etc. But I'd like to thank this committee for the several thanks that they've given to our frontline staff and all levels of the management structure, as you always do, and I'm always humbled by you doing that. And I'm delighted that you've done that in today's context of real challenges. So thank you all very much, and thank you for discussing and noting the report.
Thank you, Stephen. If there's no further questions, just go on to recommendations that members are asked to consider the performance of the social work services in respect to key duties and responsibilities for which the Chief Social Work Officer has overall responsibility as detailed in the appendix. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, outside bodies, Social Work Service Committee. This report presents members with the 2024-25 annual review of outside bodies, which seeks to allow members to review the relevance of and benefits to the Council of having elected members' representation on the outside body. In addition, the report asks members to fill a small number of vacancies and to advise of any other amendments to the existing appointments. It further asks that members to consider whether an outside body should be removed from a council scheme of representation on outside bodies. Fraser Davis is available to answer any questions, but first, Claire, could you just guide us through the process for governance? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My suggestion would be, I'm sure Fraser might have some points to add, but just have to work your way through the recommendations of the report. Okay.
Fraser?
No, thanks. No, just to echo what Claire's just said, really just, I suppose, it'd be easiest to just work through the recommendations one by one. That way we're clear on the kind of governance of it all as well.
Okay, thank you for that. So the recommendations are 2.1, to note the information detailed in appendices 1 to 5 as part of the 2024 annual review of outside bodies. 2.2.1, elected member, 1 substitute member to Public Protection Committee as detailed in 4.9. Now I understand that traditionally this has fallen to the chair and vice chair of this committee. I'd put that out to members to see if they're happy to support that ongoing. Councillor Drysdale?
Yeah, I'd be happy to support, Chair. Thanks.
Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Slater. Thank you. 2.3, to advise any of the amendment to the current appointment to Alcohol Drug Support South West Scotland as detailed in 4.1. I believe the current incumbent is Councillor Dorward. Councillor Dorward, you're happy to take up that position again? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to stay in that as that appointee. Thank you.
Thank you. At 2.5, advise of any amendments to the current appointments to Dumfries and... Sorry, I've missed one out there. 2.4, advise of any amendments to current appointments to Dumfries and Galloway Alcohol and Drugs Partnership as detailed at 4.11. Councillor Dorward, you're currently our representative. You're happy to continue in that role? Thank you.
Again, thank you, Chair. Happy to continue in role.
Thank you. And we also have Caroline Wilson as a substitute member. Are you happy to continue in that role, Caroline?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. 2.5, advise of any amendments to current appointments to Dumfries and Stewart to Women's Aid as detailed at 4.12. Our previous representatives were Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Hill. Yeah, having spoken to Councillor Drysdale, she is stepping aside from that role, as is Councillor Hill. I would be happy as chair to take up that first position, and I believe that Councillor John Young would be happy to pick up the second one, unless there are any other members wish to put themselves forward for that. Members content with that proposal? Thank you. 2.6, to consider whether Older People's Consultative Group should be removed from the Council scheme of representation on outside bodies as detailed at 4.13. Now I understand that they haven't met in the previous 12 months. And Councillor Maureen Johnson, you are a representative there. Maureen?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, when I took over the role of the community champion for the older person, there really wasn't any specific brief for that role. So I sort of took it upon myself to visit all the day centres around Dumfries and Galloway, which there are 9 of those centres. And these day centres, they provide amazing support and companionship for the senior citizens of our communities. Unfortunately, the main theme that I found through all the day centres was the funding issue, an issue of funding. And they all have to go out, and most of these places all raise funds to add on to the monies that they do get from Dumfries and Galloway Council. Now, they actually get £300,000 from the Dumfries and Galloway Council, just over that. And this covers the 9 day centres which are in Dumfries and Galloway. And these day centres provide a much needed and valuable service for our senior citizens. And the staff who are responsible for running the day centres, they're amazing. And they actually give so much of themselves. And it's not just the work, it's the raising funds and the extra hours that they put in. And I sometimes feel that they don't get the recognition that they deserve for the vital services they are providing. It can mean someone from spending a day alone at home with no support, or meeting up with friends and enjoying a meal together. And most of them supply entertainment, days out. And I found that I just wanted noted that the valuable work that these staff and volunteers carry out in all our day centres, considering the financial pressures that they're all under. I found it was, they're very happy places, and they do provide a huge, valuable support to our senior citizens. I just wanted that noted. And also in my role, I just attended online meetings with Age Scotland. I met with Food Train and just took up any issues that maybe were brought to me. But I felt that it was a role that you were sort of doing it on your own. There was no one to really go forward with this. And I just wondered if we needed to continue the role or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. The question is whether or not, because this group hasn't met in the last 12 months, as to whether it should be removed from the list of outside bodies. Fraser, can you advise us, please?
No, thanks, Chair. So I think if I picked up Councillor Johnston correctly there, she was talking about kind of the function she undertook as the older people's champion, which I appreciate probably does overlap significantly with the activities of that group. However, as Chair's just said, this report specifically about the older people's consultative group, which through speaking to colleagues in both in the Council and Health and Social Care Partnership, aware of the belief that this group is no longer active. So I suppose it's not that the work to support older people wouldn't be ongoing, it's just not through this group. So I don't know if that helps at all.
Yeah, thank you for that. Maureen, did you want to come back in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. No, I do agree. I didn't feel that it was a role that was being carried forward in any detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fraser, for those points, and to Maureen for well, I would like to thank Maureen because I know how much time she spent going around all the groups, and it was very much valued and appreciated, actually. What I wanted to point out to members today is the good work, in actual fact, that's been done with the third sector and the council in tandem together. So across my ward in particular, it'd be interesting to see if other councillors felt the same. But I know there's a lot of good comms going out there in our communities at the doctor's surgeries, for example, the, I can't remember the word, optometrists, is that it? Yes. The opticians, that's the word I'm looking for, and the post offices, etc. So the day centres, the food train, the soup and a cuppa, the walking groups set up by the council, the third sector, the statutory active sports, which I'm sure is across the rest of the region, seem to be collaborating quite well together and getting that information out there to the elderly population. But I would be interested to see what other councillors thought. To me, that's working quite well, but it might not be the same in other wards. So I think we could take it from there. I think, but I don't know where we would go from there on it, Chair, but I think it seems to be working is what I would like to say. Thanks.
Not really sure I understand where you come from with that. The question really was in relation to the Older People's Consultative Group, and I think that there is quite a lot of work being done with older people, but it's this specific group that we're asking about and whether it should be removed from our list of outside bodies, because it seems that the work's been done not in collaboration with them, but in spite of them.
That's sort of where I'm coming from, but maybe Fraser can advise us. You've obviously been working through the council, sorry to come back in, Chair, if that's okay, to make sure that's happening. So as long as you feel confident enough and other councillors feel that we're confident enough across other regions, because I'm not party to what's going on in other regions. So thanks. Through yourself, Chair.
Fraser?
No, thanks. So I guess I'm not part of social work services, so I'm not really involved in the ongoing work to support older people. I am aware of, lots of efforts across the region. You mentioned Statutory Sports Council. That similar report will be coming up to, I think, the Statutory Area Committee, asking for any amendments. So conscious that there's a lot of work ongoing, but just to kind of bring it back to this report specifically, this consultative group, in essence, is no longer active. So I'm just looking to really get approval from members to remove that from our list of outside bodies, just so we don't end up with, as we have in previous years, of a fairly lengthy, slightly out of date list, really.
Thank you for that, Fraser. On that basis, can I recommend to members that we do remove this group from the list? Thank you. Thank you, members. And finally, 2.7, advise of any amendments to current appointments to Dumfries and Galloway Champions Board, looked after children and care leavers as detailed at 4.14. Previously, we have had Councillor Drysdale and Councillor Hill who have both resigned those positions, and we have Councillor Dorswood and Councillor Wilson. Are you both happy to carry on those roles? Thank you. And can I propose that myself and Councillor John Young take up the other positions? Members happy with that? Any proposals from any other members? Thank you, members. I'm now in members' hands because I believe that lunch is just about here. We've got another 3 items. Do members want to take a break, or shall we plough on through? Are we carrying on? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 10 then, corporate parenting duties. This report has been prepared to inform members of their corporate parenting duty for our looked after children and care experienced young people as requested at committee on 10th of June 2025. Also gives us the opportunity to share with members the refreshed corporate parenting plan for 25 to 28. And Charles Rock is available to answer any questions. Do you have anything you wish to add, Charles?
Nothing else to add, Chair, thank you.
Okay, questions from members. Councillor Jameson.
Yeah, thank you. I'm referencing page 126 and the subsequent pages based on access to education. I would probably say it's education, skills and community well-being. I have a question on, in this paper we'll use the words make sure quite a lot. We will make sure this and we will make sure that. We'll make sure the right support are in place and prioritise for looked after children and young people. My question is, do we have the resources and do we have the collaboration to actually achieve the positive outcomes that are required? The activities that are suggested and listed, in fact, are all commendable, but how do we actually deliver these outcomes? When, I'll just use schools as an example, but social services will have similar issues. You know, 40% of children already have assisted support and needs, and a lot of these looked after children will be amongst those 40%. The guidance teachers are under extreme pressure. Mental health is under extreme pressure. It's really quite difficult to see how our resources can manage that unless we are much more collaborative, effectively collaborative, so that these young people that come into school do indeed have the support they require, because it's difficult enough for kids that are actually in school all the time with assisted support needs, but these young people have additional needs to that. So it's a huge challenge which I don't underestimate. I just wonder how we can actually deliver by June 2026 on the priorities and the objectives that we've set out in this paper.
Thank you, Councillor. Charles?
Through yourself, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Jameson, for the question. I'll probably just reference, first of all, in terms of maybe the choice of language to make sure. I think there was a huge level of consultation that took place with our children and young people through the Champions Board and further than that in terms of the events that took place to capture that. I think some of the language we were thinking was almost a response to go back to give that type of commitment. I don't underestimate the challenges. We don't underestimate the challenges in this space. To provide the reassurance for members around that, we have recognised the corporate parenting oversight in terms of the leadership. We have our new leadership arrangements with subgroups that sit under the corporate parenting arrangements. We've got the support from our Executive Director for Enabling Customer Services, Lorna Meehan, who sits there in partnership with myself. In terms of these big measurements, you know, that sits as well in terms of a wider need and challenge that we face around the experiences colleagues in education have around some of that complex need that sits there. It's not necessarily just for our children in corporate parenting. The collaboration is there. We recognise there are different ways we need to do supports to make sure we get that right, appreciating that resourcing is challenging. There's a different way around whole family we need to think about, and I know there's an opportunity, both myself and colleagues in education will be looking at that to think of different ways in terms of taking that forward. It will underpin the getting it right for every child practice model that sits here to kind of support those from universal services and targeted services that meets that need. I think we do need to make that. I think these are our children, our most valuable children who are in our care. We have that parenting responsibility. To do that, we have to give ourselves a measurement on that as best we can, and if there are gaps there, then very much reflecting about what needs to change to achieve that. So this is for that extraordinary group of young people that we have to give that commitment to, and I think there are huge activity sitting under that in terms of the measurements of that we will create and foster the right conditions to create good scrutiny and the push and pull for each other that reduce some of the barriers. So hopefully that helps pick up that point, Councillor Jameson.
Councillor Jameson.
Do we follow up? Just a couple of follow-ups. Obviously going through school from early years right through to when they leave school, go to college hopefully, etc., etc. We've quizzed the education team on this as well. What is a positive destination for these children? It'll all vary, but it's having the aspiration with the children and for the children that a positive destination is maybe more than they think they can achieve. So it's that one-to-one relationship that will be really helpful if we can inspire, if you like. That's it's a big word, but if we can develop a sense of aspiration amongst these young folk who've obviously had difficult upbringings, but that'll take, again, specialism and resources. And a separate question, and this is due to my lack of understanding that I'm quickly grasping, and as the community's part of the education skills community wellbeing is the work of the youth work. Is that they obviously are part of this whole package? I would hope.
Charles?
through yourself, Chair, Councillor Jameson, they are a huge resource in terms of supporting the work around corporate parenting. You know, they support a lot of the groups that sit for our, you know, the voice of the children and young people who gets facilitated. Some of the events that have been organised over the summer that members will be aware of, in partnership within the youth group communities and in social work. If you had the opportunity to kind of step in and see the richness of that relationship that takes place there, we can't underestimate the work that they do there, and we're very much appreciative of that. We will have an opportunity, a future social work committee, of a joint piece of work that both for the youth group communities team and social work team are taken around developing a film production around experiences of children who are in our care. Still slightly in production, if that's the right technical term to use around that, but we are hoping to present this at a future committee with the support of our children and young people who participate to help demonstrate that. And you know, we couldn't do that without the creativity and the spark that our colleagues in youth services support around that. So I can't underestimate the input with that as well. Just one thing just to add on about the question, and that aspiration we need to have as corporate parents, we need to give our children and young people who are in our care hope moving through with the right support at the right time that they need at different stages. That transition from being a child, a young person into adulthood, we can't underestimate, because we know that the evidence base is there, and sadly the evidence base is there through our colleagues in justice services who will also highlight that we don't get that right. You know, this has to be driven forward by values, and the right values and support to get this right. Thank you.
I just have one quick follow-up, just very quick, convener, if you'll indulge me. Youth work now sits with the education, skills, community well-being now, and quite often when we're talking about social service, etc., education is left out. I would really appreciate if education were involved with that, because it's crucial that our schools understand the needs of children in need, and they work very closely and support the youth work and social work.
For yourself, Chair. Yep, Councillor Jameson, just to reassure you, in terms of the corporate parenting, colleagues in education are well placed in this. They're contributing towards this area. And again, there's a sheer value around this and recognising what their responsibilities are. In terms of the actual work, in terms of the voice, you know, we've got colleagues in education who are linked in with colleagues in youth services as well, to make sure that there's an understanding of that voice and need there as well. You know, part of the intention of this film production, I don't, because part of this is you give the sort of the license and creativity to the young persons themselves, and I'm always mindful of doing this previously, where we tried to get a similar video, and the children and young people created a horror movie in the community which completely went 180. So I appreciate what we're looking to get out of this in terms of our community plan and partnership, in terms of a key message is important. But what we were hoping for is for our young people to tell us what makes a good social worker, what makes a good carer, what makes a good teacher, from their perspective, that we can help shape this and the values that the young people are sharing with us, that will be at the heart of our recruitment, the heart of change that we're taking forward to hear that voice. And we're hopefully this will be part of that, we're able to kind of take some of that out and extract that to affect that culture change. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Any further questions? Councillor Ashburn.
Thank you. No, it's good to see this report, specifically the action plan as well. Just one little technical question really, page 140. In terms of the aims around housing for our capacity as corporate parents, one of the boxes says, whilst we would want you to be settled in a permanent home, we will be involved in creating a new temporary supported housing for those that need it. Can you just expand upon that one and what that actually means? Thank you.
Through yourself, Chair, thanks, Councillor, for the question around that. We appreciate that transition for children who are in our care and looked after away from home, moving into independent living is a gap, it's a huge gap. And the preparation support for around that to enable our young people to thrive in their own independent living is huge. We sometimes see bridges and some links within that provides additional scaffolding. That is through our supported accommodation, which would also be kind of looked at as a sort of temporary housing situation. With that, it's not a care setting, it's a supported accommodation that allows the development and growth for young people within that setting, and prepares them far better for own independent living. And the intention for us really as a measurement around that is to reduce the likelihood and risk of homelessness for our young people, which is a huge factor for those who have care experience.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I can get my words out this time. So, obviously this is the first time I've sat in this committee for a while, and it says the reason the report is here is because it was asked for on the 10th of June 2025. My understanding of corporate parenting is that all councillors are corporate parents. So should this report not then go back to full council? And I'm saying that and being quite recognising that the budget, there was a template brought forward that the administration at the time put in their budget, and one of the impact assessments was that it would negatively affect looked after children, which, you know, we wouldn't touch for the barge pole, because obviously we appreciate that we are actually their corporate parents. So I think this should maybe actually now go on to full council to remind all 43 of us that we are all corporate parents. Thank you.
Claire, can you offer us some guidance on that, and then I'll go to Stephen. By way of governance.
Okay, thank you. I mean, there's no formal requirement set out in our scheme for corporate and parenting to be considered at full council. It says what will be a council decision delegated to Social Work Services Committee for this report to be formally noted. But I'll pass over to Stephen.
Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. And it's a really important question. And the short answer is it does get reported to full council, but it's part of the Children's Services Plan. And this is one of the appendices, so it comes through that way. Charles and colleagues, and Lorna through her chairing of the group, want to socialise this plan much more visibly. So this is a key partnership, well, a key committee. It's also going to go to the community planning partnership as well to get oversight at that level, which we think locally has been something of a gap. So hopefully that answers the question.
Councillor Stevens, you happy with that?
I would still like to see it come back as a separate. I know it's for us to know, but I do think that we just need to remind all 43 of us that we're all corporate parents, not just social work. Thank you.
Claire? I was just going to suggest it could perhaps be circulated, even though it isn't required to be on the formal agenda.
Happy with that? Thank you. Okay, members, if I can go to the recommendations, if there's no further questions. Thank you. As to note 2.1, corporate parent duties for our looked after children and care experienced young people, as outlined in paragraphs 4.1 to 4.6. 2.2, the refresh of the corporate parenting plan 2025 to 2028 attached at appendix. And 2.3, our statutory duty to report on our corporate parenting annual performance report will be presented to this committee on an annual basis as outlined in paragraph 4.8. Thank you, members. Moving on to item 11, which is the workforce planning. And this report has been prepared to inform elected members of the Social Work Services Workforce Plan, setting out a 3-year framework for our social work services which aims to maximise capacity, skills and competency of our workforce, with the intention of increasing the resilience of our service and providing development opportunities for staff, together with the commitment to developing a healthy working environment that supports positive emotional health and well-being amongst our workforce. Charles is available to answer questions. Thank you. Councillor Slater.
Yeah, it's on page 158. I see that there's more lost days with illness. It's went up quite a lot, I must admit. Maybe, is there a reason? Obviously people are ill, but is there any other reason for that? Thank you.
Charles?
Yeah, thanks. Through yourself, Chair. A number of different reasons that reported through our portal, that we actually had a discussion with colleagues in HR yesterday to do a bit more of a deep dive within that. one of the significant factors that are contribute to that is personal matters relating to staff, amongst other, ailments and illnesses that we have recorded. However, it does feel slightly counterintuitive in terms of the pressures that our frontline workforce are experiencing, some of the complexities of work, some of that sort of trauma that they hold within a community level in terms of the work that they do. At times, both myself and Stephen have often referenced about how do we pull back the curtain as best we can around the role that social work do working with some of that complex vulnerability. And that impacts on staff, and it fluctuates at different times, that pressures. What we need to do is to put together that range of supports at the earliest point that can identify that from a visible sense to try and make the sort of reasonable adjustments and supports that minimise that. But we need to recognise that for our frontline workforce, they face huge pressures to try and meet that need, and also try and meet unmet need, and trying to kind of fill the gaps around other areas of supports that sit within the wider community planning supports that are not necessarily accessible for both children but their parents and caregivers in terms of the timelines that they need. So it has a knock-on effect, and we're trying everything to try and support that in a more proactive way. Thank you.
Obviously, I'm aware of that. Obviously, the workload, the heavier the workload, yes, it gets more stressful, and people sometimes have to take some time off. Thank you.
Councillor Dorward.
Thank you, Chair. Again, page 158, but the top table, which looks at recruitment, retention and pay. And to use your term, Charles, counterintuitive is the word here, because I would have thought that pay in our urban settings would have been higher than pay in our more rural settings. Is that a trend in social work to attract people into rural settings, or it's just how it is? I would have thought like Edinburgh and Aberdeen would have had a higher pay level because of the cost of living issues there than perhaps our more rural areas, but it seems to be a reverse trend. Just a question. I'm interested in what that means. Thank you.
Stephen.
Yeah, Councillor Dowd, it's an interesting question. And this table obviously just selects some local authority areas, but Glasgow, for example, have amongst the highest salaries because of their issues. I think Edinburgh City and Aberdeen have taken other approaches in terms of their budgets, and it's quite surprising to see Edinburgh at the bottom. Aberdeen City have just recently changed the contract, so all of their staff moved down to 35 hours a week with a commensurate reduction in salary, and they would have been higher on the list previously. I think the change in nature of this, so we've moved up the table, as it were. We've consistently been like bottom, second bottom, joint with a number of other areas, but some of the decisions people have made about budget elsewhere have moved them below where we are. So I hate to say this, but it's not because we've proactively done anything to improve our position. It's been other people's actions that have worsened that. So we're seeing a much different picture what we've seen in the past. So previously it would have been the biggest city's higher salary to try and attract people, and also the cost of living there being higher. The fiscal positions changed the landscape quite considerably.
Councillor Dorward.
Thanks for that, Stephen. It's interesting, isn't it? It would be interesting also to compare with family groups to see. I mean, I'm noticing in Highlands, probably for me, one of the comparable rural areas that we, should be compared with. Grammar wasn't very good there, sorry. But they have a higher salary, and I think that's probably, again, just my thoughts only. They are a rural area. They have similar issues in terms of transportation, travelling, etc., etc. And that would be to attract specifically people to that area, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Stephen?
Yeah, the comparison with the Highlands is a very good one. And for quite some time now, our colleagues in the Highlands have struggled to recruit permanent staff and have had a reliance on agency staff for quite some time. I say that having had conversations with my counterparts in the Highlands, and that's been an issue for them. So again, it's trying to make the overall package in terms of the salary, the 35-hour week, and everything else that's kind of attracting the staff there. So you're absolutely right.
Thank you. Councillor Dashper.
Thank you. Page 164, at the top there, mentions as one of the potential actions, develop a service-wide communication plan. I don't know if we could just expand on that. I know in enabling and customer services, for example, they're now doing an internal service newsletter to all the staff within that directorate, just to keep in touch. Is that something that we're looking at doing? Thank you.
Charles.
Through yourself, Chair, thanks, Councillor, for that. We do have a communication plan in place. We're looking to refresh that, but kind of learn from colleagues in other parts of the council in terms of areas of comms they've done to develop kind of QR codes and other areas that seem to be kind of well received by staff and getting that message across. We need to appreciate that there is a part about communication. Nothing can replace the ability to have the interactive face-to-face conversations with frontline staff. And both myself and Stephen have a sort of structured plan throughout the year that we do engage with staff. We need to supplement that at different points to make sure we give our staff that relevant update and recognition of the work that they're doing. Staff are so busy that some of the feedback is that sometimes the interface in terms of the message just doesn't get right, and you worry that there's a message for Stephen Morgan or myself who's not necessarily prioritising that given day, given the busy schedule they face. So we need to think of different ways to meet the need to make sure that message is there, which I think is really important, and actually embed some of the kind of values and principles of leadership that comes through that. So we're looking to refresh that, update it, and be a bit more innovative in how we do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Charles. I see at the bottom as well, it says all staff will have the opportunity to attend conversations with SLT and elected members as well. So it would be good if us as councillors can actually have those conversations with the staff. That's good. Thank you.
Stephen?
Yeah, this is a really important issue, and Charles has made reference to the fact that he, I and others do try and have as many conversations with frontline staff as possible. I'm well aware that quite a few of our frontline staff watch this committee, and they'll be sitting in their office or at home in all likelihood later on tonight thinking, well, I've not seen either of those in a wee while, and you know, we do try, but our reach is limited in terms of those face-to-face conversations. I recently went out and about 4 or 5 different offices across the region, and because of the busyness of what the staff teams were doing, one of those days there was actually nobody available. It's not because they didn't want to be there, it's not because I wasn't attempting to be visible, but the busyness of the task is really difficult. So all of those other communications that we put in place in terms of newsletters, QR codes for information, etc., we asked our staff to have a standing agenda item on team meetings saying, questions for management, whatever that happens to be. But again, these things are quite artificial, and we've had limited response in terms of questions to the governance group from those processes. So I just felt it was important, because I do know that some of our staff watch this, and as much as Charles and I try and reach as many staff as we can and other senior colleagues, it's not always possible, and it would have been unfair of me to sit here and not reference that to our staff who are out there watching this. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Any other questions? Okay, in the absence of questions, we will move on to the recommendations. Oh, it's not there. Go on. Bear with me, members. You got it? Members are asked to note and comment on Social Work Services Workforce Plan 2025-28 as attached at the appendix. Thank you, members. And the final item we have at the minute is the minutes of the Public Protection Committee from 22nd of April 2025. Members happy to note? No comment? Thank you very much. And item 13, any other business? I've not been informed of any other business, so thank you all for your attendance and participation today. Thank you, members.
Thanks, Chair.